Welcome everybody to TheTitleFight.com. Gordie Tamayo, Steve Gallegos here. Going over HBO's doubleheader they had last night, featuring a couple bouts that are leading towards a crash course with each other here. Kicking off the televised portion of the night there, we had Sergey Kovalev taking on Ismael Sillakh. Blue chip prospect coming against a heavy hitter in Kovalev. A lot of people were wondering about this matchup here and kind of on the edge whether or not that Kovalev was the goods and the real deal, giving actually Sillakh a good benefit of the doubt here and thinking he might actually have what it takes to pull off the upset. Steve, we had Kovalev come in here and 2 rounds into it just demolished Sillakh. What was your overall take on watching that bout?
Oh man, it was impressive, Sillakh, came out in the first round, and kind of dominated the first part of it, landed some good shots, trying to make a statement. But, Kovalev, took the shots well, weathered the storm, and just, took it to him in the second, man, just destroyed him. Hit him hard flush, as he went down the first time, but then, he landed the haymaker, put him down the second time, and that was it, it was basically lights out. So Kovalev, impressive as we've always seen him. So very good win for him, and it's just, his stock just continues to rise with each fight.
Right. No, it is. I mean, he's proven some of the critics wrong there, that he's, just kind of a lucky punch away from nailing these other guys that he's already blasted through in the past here. He's already calling out, pretty humble guy as far as what he was stating that he wants to do next or who he's wanting to face next. However, he did make mention of wanting Stevenson next, who was the guy that was holding the main event down there against Tony Bellew, which we'll get to touch and base about these two guys possibly meeting up in the future here in just a second. But Bellew is talking a lot of smack, even calling Adonis Stevenson a dwarf, and as Adonis Stevenson said after the fight, the dwarf knocked him out. He came in, showed some class in boxing, did see some holes in his game. To my impression there, Steve, he was getting touched a little bit too much, but in the 6th round he still had enough to take out Bellew by the end of the 6th round there. What was your take on that one?
Well, we saw in the early rounds, Stevenson was having some trouble, but he, as usual, he was able to weather the storm and, just able to take him out in the 6th. The only problem I really have with Stevenson's game is the fact that, as we've seen him in the past, he holds his hands low at times, tends to play a little too much in the ring, and he needs to, tone that down just a little bit, because eventually, he's going to get himself caught if he continues to do that. Max Kellerman made a great point during that fight that, bringing back an old fight, with Nate Campbell and Robbie Peden, where Campbell did the same thing, hold his hands low, and then eventually got knocked out. Tony Bellew said before the fight that HBO was, hyping up Stevenson, not like Mike Tyson, but pretty much calling him someone like Pernell Whitaker with a punch, basically saying that it was an insult to him. So, but really, I would think that would be the ultimate compliment to call someone like Adonis Stevenson, a guy like Pernell Whitaker, with a punch, because Whitaker was one of the great champions, of the past decade or two.
I agree there. I think he was just trying to get under his skin and ended up paying for it towards the end there. I mean, he was a game fighter. Bellew came in to put up a fight. He just didn't have enough to outclass Adonis Stevenson. Now, moving forward with these two guys, he was asked for like the second time after a fight here of what he thinks about taking on Sergey Kovalev, and kind of dodges around the topic. I mean, at first he did say, hey, if HBO puts up the money for it, then great, let's make it happen. But then he kind of moved on forward, talking about that the fans wanted to see him face either Carl Froch or having him face Bernard Hopkins, which neither one of those seems to be the consensus out there with fans. They would like to see him placed up against the biggest threat that he has, which would be Kovalev. What's your interpretation, Steve, on his post-fight comments? Does he want to take on Kovalev? Does he want to fight the best out there, or is he, just chasing the paycheck?
Well, it kind of seems like he was kind of chasing the paycheck, by calling out someone like Froch, because Froch didn't look too good last week against Grove. basically was lucky that he escaped with the late stoppage. In the fight with Hopkins, that's not a fight that's going to be made. Obviously, there is a cold war going on between promoters and networks, being the fact that Hopkins is with Golden Boy and signed to Showtime, and of course Stevenson is with HBO. So I don't see that fight being made anytime soon. Frost's fight can be more of a makeable fight, but I think the best fight out there for boxing fans and for the division is a fight with Kovalev. They basically showcase both of them on the same night so they can meet each other eventually in the future. Why don't we see this fight this next spring? It would be great. Be a lot of fireworks. Roy Jones said it perfectly. Be an all-action fight, and wouldn't have to go to the judges' scorecards because both of these guys have come to knock one another out, and a knockout's going to come. So, yes, I think the Kovalev fight is the best fight right now.
Got to agree with you on that one, and I think HBO can actually kind of piece it together the same way that they matched up Triple G with Stevens and how they promoted that fight with, two monsters colliding, and then the whole promotion behind it was these guys are coming to hurt each other, somebody's going to get hurt. And I see a similar type of fight playing out between these two. They both have that knockout punch power there that they can really inflict some damage on one another. And hey, if HBO is putting up good money for bouts like Ward Rodriguez or Rigondeaux Agbeko, which is coming up this weekend, why not towards a fight like this? I think fight fans are really wanting to see something like this go down. So hopefully we get to see it matched up. Put these two guys against each other and have them solidify and really put a stamp on who has dominion over their division here. Now, moving forward into this week, and Steve, I want to get your take on a couple bouts that are going on. Rival promoters, networks going head-to-head again, unfortunately, but nonetheless, either way, some really good fights that are going to be taking place here. We just touched base on Rigondeaux Agbeko, and then we got Paulie Malignaggi coming up and taking up Zab Judah. Let's touch base on the first one here, as we had just mentioned, Rigondeaux Agbeko. How do you see this fight playing out, Steve?
I really don't know exactly what fight we're going to see because, we haven't seen Joseph Agbeko, at least, since the two fights with Mars, I know he's been in the ring since then, but fight fans really haven't seen him since those two bouts. Of course, Agbeko is very game, very experienced, can adapt to most situations, but we don't know, what he has left in the tank. Rigondeaux is, still, young and tough, and very, very skilled inside the ring. It's going to be a tough test for Rigondeaux, but I still think he comes out with the W. I just think that, Agbeko's just going to come up a little bit short. It'll be interesting, of course, Agbeko's going to come in, with his experience, and give Rigondeaux some trouble early on, but I think at the end, Rigondeaux's going to get the W.
Going into the other bout that we just mentioned here with Malignaggi and Judah, two vets of the game that have been around for a minute. Both love to talk smack, however, they both seem to have matured over the years and don't really seem that going into play during this fight. A lot of mutual respect going on for one another. Both heading on home turf down in Brooklyn. What do you see with this fight taking place there, Steve? They still have, the drive to want to compete at this elite level, but they're both past their primes at this point. Who do you see taking the edge on this one?
It's kind of hard to say because both fighters, are very skilled. Both fighters have a lot of experience, great technicians in the ring. This should be a pretty good, decent chess match. I expect some good fireworks in this bout. It's who can impose their will on another, who can outsmart and outthink the other fighter, and that's a tough one. It's a toss-up, it's a crossroads fight, between two very skilled former champions, towards the end of their careers in their hometown, so it's an all-Brooklyn showdown. Both fighters want to perform very well in front of their home crowd, so they don't want to disappoint. Who I give the edge to, I give the slight edge to Zab Judah, based on the fact that he's very smart, very crafty in the ring, and he's just got that little bit of extra pop in his punches, to give Malignaggi problems. But you don't ever want to count out someone like Paulie either. Paulie is very smart, one of the smartest, craftiest fighters in the game as well. So So it's a toss-up, but it's Judah.
And for the loser, I mean, do they go home and call it quits from now? I mean, we know Malignaggi has a career in the broadcasting game there with Showtime. He's a color commentator for them, does very well. People seem to like him on there as well, so he's got a future beyond boxing. Just to flip the coin here, if Zab were to actually lose this bout, do you see him still being able to stay in the mix there, or is he just done at this point?
If Zab were to lose this fight, yeah, I think he should be done. He's had a great career. Nothing more to prove in this sport. But Zab Judah, just has that intensity. That competition. For him. Whether win or lose, Zab Judah's still going to hang around and still going to fight on. For years to come. So I think Judah should go away should he lose this fight, but I don't think he will.
So a crossroads bout this coming up weekend, and hopefully leading into another crossroads bout with Kovalev and Stevenson. Everybody's fingers are crossed. Hope's still out in the mix right there. Either way, we got some good stuff coming down the road. Once again, Steve Gallegos and Gordie Tamayo with TheTitleFight.com. Thanks for tuning in.